Welcome to this week's speaking tip. This tip is relatively simple, but it is one of the more complicated things to do. What I run into with a lot of speakers who are writing typically like a 5 to 7 minute speech, which is a typical Toastmaster speech, is that when they write a speech, they try to write with the time in mind, and they don't want to put too much in it because they're trying to keep it within the 5 to 7 minute time frame. And this is true in any type of speaking you're doing. If you're doing a 1 hour keynote, you don't write a 1 hour speech. You want the best material that you can put together. And a lot of times you have a lot of concepts you want to try to put in there. So when I'm working with someone, and again, this comes from a lot of the coaching that I do with people, we're trying to write the 5 to 7 minute speech, and the story needs more detail brought out in it. And there's facts and there's other components in it. They go, I don't have time, and I don't have enough time to put all that in the speech. I go, look, we're not at the final version. Write all that out. And then we're going to look at how we can condense it down. We're going to look at what we need to pull out and make it fit within the 5 to 7 minute speech. But if you write a speech with the time in mind when you're trying to do the initial writing, you're not going to get a very good speech because you're allowing the time to dictate what your creativity allows you to do. You need to write out the entire concept of what you want to do. Now, typically, as an example, in a 5 to 7 minute speech, we usually have somewhere between, we'll say, 650 to 850 words in that speech. Somewhere in that range is what we're looking for, depending on the person's speaking style and how fast they speak. I will take a speech up, working on it, we'll take it up, it might have 2,000 words in it, but we're going to bring it down to be at 700 words by the time we're done with it. And so we write out everything, all the different creative aspects of it, all the different details of the story, we put that in there, and we see, now we can see the whole picture. And now, how do we encapsulate that? How can we say all that in like 1/3 the amount of time? So the simple tip is, and this is a relatively short, simple tip, when you're writing a speech, write out all the information you want to put in it, and now you can see it, and you can pick the best information to go in there. Quite often, when people are writing a speech, they'll put things in that don't make sense because they're trying to jam a lot of things in, and they're not giving the backstory behind it. They make sense in their head, but it's not going to make sense in the head of the audience. That's why when you write the whole thing out, you can see the whole story. Now we can look at it. Can we condense that down, and can we get that whole story to flow? And sometimes you have to cut meat and bone out of the speech. But a lot of this can be done by condensing down the way you say things, condensing the word count down to say the same thing with fewer words. But unless you put that whole pie together, you can't get the slice you need. So the speaking tip here is when you're writing a speech, create like crazy on it and look at all the things you want to say, and then start putting the pieces together that are going to fit in the time frame that you have. As I said, this works with a 1 hour keynote as well. If we're working on a 1 hour keynote, I would expect 3 hours of material. And then sit down and start to work out how can you put the different material in. You wind up with the best of the 3 hours. So if you think about it, do you want the best of 7 minutes of speaking, or do you want the best of 30 minutes of speaking put into 7 minutes? Then you're going to really have a lot of good content for your audience because you've taken this big piece and now you've condensed down all these jewels in it. The only way you can do that is to write in abundance, create in abundance, and then pick the best of what you've created. So like I said, it's a very simple tip. It's hard to do, but it is what will make you into a much better speaker because it's going to get you to look at all the information you want to say and then pick the very best. Another component of this is a lot of times you've got to pick things in your speech that you love, and you got to take them out. I call this, it's like picking your favorite child. And there have been a number of speeches that I've done, and quite honestly, the most intense one I practiced with this was, of course, my world champion speech, but I had probably 20 minutes of material that I condensed down to 6 minutes and 15 seconds. And it got down to the point where I had stories and I had analogies and I had points I wanted to make, and I loved them. I loved them so much. but they didn't fit in the time frame. And I had to take them out. And I had to look at each one and say, which one forwards my message the best? Because all I have is this much space to do it in. I don't have this much space to do it in. I got this much. I've got to make the point in that space. And it can be a brutal time because you're pulling stuff out of your speech you really love. I come back to one of the things I tell almost everybody I coach, and something that I had to learn the hard way, is that the audience doesn't know what you didn't tell them. And so there might be this huge backstory to it. What they only know is what you tell them. And you don't have to worry about the fact that there's all these other things that added into that, and there was all this big story to it. All they know is what you tell them, and you have to make sure that the time you have, it flows smooth and it's clear in their mind. And yeah, there might be 50 other points you wanted to make, or all these other details in the story that got you to that conclusion, but you don't have time for it, and they don't know it. They just know what you told them. So the tip today is, if you're going to write a speech, write in abundance, and then compress it and edit it down to fit in the space that you need to fit it in. And I think you're going to find that you're going to wind up with a lot better speeches with a lot better content in it, because you had a lot of stuff to pick from, rather than trying to write within the time frame with your initial speech, trying to write within the front time frame that you had, because you're going to leave out very important facts, because you're going to say, I don't have time to do that. It's not going to fit. You're not going to put it down and be able to reflect on it. Okay, so that's the tip for the day. Short, quick, concise, hard to do. Get busy and do it. I'll see you next week.